black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Sunday night, I hope your week's been treating you well. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen tonight. My first guest is Bill, and Bill comes to us from Utah. When he was a little kid, he was out running around with a friend of his, and they came upon this creature. And it's something that, it's a very brief encounter, but it's something that's always bothered Bill. I'll also be talking to Carl, and Carl is a retired deputy sheriff out in Georgia, and he's going to be talking about his own personal encounters, including a roadside crossing. And then we'll wrap up with Chris Marola. He is the author of The One Who Runs and Hides, and Chris has a very interesting encounter, actually multiple encounters. He bought this cabin in Connecticut out in the middle of nowhere, and Chris is he's welcomed me to come out. He's like, hey man, if you want to see what I'm talking about, come on out. And it's on a lot of acreage, and no one had lived in this cabin for 11 years. And when Chris moved in, weird stuff started happening, and it just got weirder and weirder. So I asked Chris if he'd come on and just talk about some of the different things that happened to him. And it's all documented in the book along with his evidence. And the name of the book, again, is The One Who Runs and Hides. If you get a chance, go to Amazon and check it out. I wanted to play this for you guys. I posted this to the blog on SasquatchChronicles.com. And there's this guy, he goes out to these mines, and he explores the mines, and he's had a lot of weird things happen. But he was in this mine, and this isn't Bigfoot related, I just found it fascinating. He was in this mine, and if you fast forward to about the 12-minute mark, he's about halfway through the mine, and he starts to hear something. And I've listened to this over and over and over again, and I swear it's voices. I'm going to try and amplify the sound a little bit so you guys can hear it. Tell me what you think.
And then you can see how big these timbers are. That's about almost a foot in diameter, the big cross timber. So they had to put big ones in here to hold up all of this rock. And you can see right here where some of these boards are bending. Do you hear that? Sounds like, what, is that wind? I don't know if you can hear that on the camera. Do you hear that? It stopped. Well, I don't know what that is. That doesn't sound like wind, but that's crazy. Don't know if that's a bird or I don't know what that is. It almost sounds like snakes, but wow. I've heard some weird stuff in mines, but that is definitely creepy. I don't know what that is. So let's get out of here and head back out to the portal. almost weird. I don't hear it. Wow, that was strange. All right, so, Jesus. That's the Waldeck mine.
I'm not sure how well that translated over the podcast, but if you get a chance, it's on SasquatchChronicles.com. Go watch the video. It's creepy, especially when you get headphones in. I swear it sounds like voices. But anyway, I don't know how well that translated to what you guys hear. Strange to say the least. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Bill to the show. Bill, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I know your encounter took place in Utah. It was several years back, wasn't it, Bill, that you saw this? You were just a kid.
Yeah, I think I was like 14 or 15, and I'm 52 now, so I don't know, I guess you'd have to do the math. It's quite a ways back.
Yeah. Well, if you would you walk us into it and tell us what you were doing and what did you see?
Well, I grew up in a mountain valley area in Utah, and I grew up in a town that had a big reservoir, and we used to go fish it. And certain times of the year, the reservoir would get super low, so we could fish the inlet, and other times of the year it was underwater. So me and my friend were just crossing over the high water mark, and we were on a hillside. Well, it's kind of a hill, 45 to get down in. And so we looked down in the willows. I saw something that looked like it was hunched over, sitting on its haunches, digging in the ground with its back to us. And about the time I saw it, my buddy was kind of jumping around, flipping around because he'd seen a snake, and I grabbed him and turned him to look at it. And about that time, it kind of stood up, but not all the way straight, and just plowed through the willows and the brush, just making a bunch of racket.
Yeah, and I know
pretty much what we saw.
Yeah, I know it was a short encounter, and I know when it got up, did it run off like a man or did it run off like a bear?
It ran off on two legs. You know what I mean? But I guess what I keep saying is it didn't straight up and straighten its back all the way. It was kind of, maybe it's just how its knees are bent or something a little weird. But it didn't. To me, it didn't look like it was all the way up, but it was on two legs. It was bipedal. It got up and ran off.
Yeah, and you would think if it would have been a bear, it would have dropped all fours and bolted off. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing, for weeks after that. I mean, he was a year younger than me. Being in our teens, we tried to ration out what else it could have been. Could have been, any wildlife down there, from wild pig to bear, like you said, because this ground pretty much doesn't. I mean, it runs. It's all river bottoms and it goes all the way up into a higher mountain reservoir, and so it doesn't get. I mean, it probably certain areas of this doesn't see anybody for years at a time. No one's ever down in there, and some places you can't even get down in, but it's so private, so remote in a populated area because nobody can get in it, and it's all posted and all that good stuff that, so there's bear in there and there's bigger game in there. But
yeah,
like you said, that's the closest thing I could think that could run. But bear don't run on their two hind legs.
Yeah,
they'll get up and walk a little bit and then go back down.
Back down, yeah. And I think even at the age you were at, I think that you guys would have recognized it being a bear right away. Even a bear standing up, it still has the outline of a bear. And what you saw, did it resemble anything like that, or was it more like a man? I realize this is a really quick glimpse you're getting.
Well, to me, it was, more like a man. But I mean, I listened to your podcast and I've read up on him a little bit, and my uncle was really into him and the Sasquatch deal, and everybody has always told me how they're so massive and big. And I mean, being about, I don't know, so hard west distance from that long ago, but half a football field, because football field looking down onto it, the creature, itself, it didn't seem to be massive to me. I mean, it was probably 6.5 feet tall, but it wasn't, tree trunk legs and stuff like that, like I always hear. And from what I remember, I really think it was either a small female or it was a juvenile. I don't think it was full grown. It just didn't seem huge.
Yeah, it wasn't King Kong sitting there digging in the dirt.
No, it wasn't. And we scared it just as much as it scared us. I mean, it wanted nothing to do with us. And we were, I think if my buddy wouldn't have been jumping around like he was, we probably could have got a pretty good look at it, the way the wind was blowing and stuff, because we weren't, it wasn't blowing down on it from where we were. But him screaming about a blow snake, and, it finally figured out that something was watching it, and it just wanted to get away. It just wanted to get in cover, so.
Let me ask you, I know you've been looking into this for a while, Bill. What do you think Sasquatch is? What's your own personal opinion?
That's kind of a hard one. I personally think it's a form of great ape. I mean, I think it's more intelligent than not isn't quite at the same level we're at, or maybe more. But I think that it's another. I just think it's another class of ape. That's my opinion. Everybody has their own. I guess we'll never know until we have one either in a cage or.
That's why I love that question, because there's no wrong answer. I mean, at the end of the day, anyone really could be right, and it's so hard. That's why I like the question to get. What are people thinking this thing is? But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing it. I know it was a brief encounter, but I find them all fascinating, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, not a problem. And in fact, let me ask you, what do you think they are? Because I always hear you ask people, but I've heard. I guess maybe I don't pay attention to everything you say, but so what do you think Sasquatch is? Do you think it's a great ape, or do you think it's more human?
Well, if I go into my opinion, it'll be an hour-long show. I mean, I can give you a presentation on it.
I got you.
I mean, I don't really have a quick answer for you, but I think there's more to it than just an ape. I really do, and a lot of times I think that. When people have encounters like what you had, Bill, where it's a quick glimpse or even a longer glimpse, but they're out hiking or they're out hunting, and it's a real brief encounter with these things, you could go with the argument that it's an unknown primate we haven't been able to catch up with. You could absolutely go with that argument. There's a couple other things that fall apart with that argument, like why hasn't this come out when it's on every continent on this planet? These things are found. Why haven't we caught up with this thing? And it really makes you stop and go, I don't know. That's strange. Why haven't we, the argument of like, well, there's no bodies because the forest eats the bodies. Well, that's true, but these things are found in Arizona. These things are found in New Mexico. These things are found in Nevada, where there's not a ton of forests, for the most part. And so there's so many weird things. When people have these things on their property, there's a lot of weird things that go on with these things that your normal person wouldn't ever hear about, because their encounter was brief. They saw it, it ran off, it looked like an animal, it growled like an animal, it threw rocks like a monkey, that sort of thing. But when people have these things on their property, there is so many weird things that go on I can't even tell you. I mean, if I went over and actually gave a presentation on this, I'd probably be exhausted afterwards, because there's so much information that people have told me. So I guess to answer your question, I really don't know what they are. I think that they are more than a primate, and like a non-human primate. I don't think they're human.
I've heard some of the woo-woo end, like maybe they're dimensional, or maybe they're an alien, maybe they're like I don't think we will ever know until we actually have one.
Well, yeah, and
that's the thing. Will we ever?
And the other
we
thing,
may never.
Yeah, you're right. And the other thing too is, I know that's being covered up, but why would they
I think it is too, and I think it is because of logging. But that's just my opinion, and I could be totally wrong. Because I think that if it was an animal that's well known, and you say that the government covers it up, I mean, this is just off the hip. But if they come out and say, yes, it exists, it has to be protected, well, there goes, that's a lot of land that's going to have to be protected. You know what I mean? There's logging and everything else would be affected by that. So, economy, money, the big evil.
Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. If you didn't want it to come out, you just look the other way.
Yeah.
If it was just a monkey out there running around, it would make sense that the government would just kind of look the other way and not really ever address it. But why is it when people have real evidence that these things are around, there's a cover-up to the extent of like a UFO cover-up? I've had many people off the air tell me some guys showed up and wanted this and wanted that. It's people who have real evidence. Well, why would there be such a... why would they care? You know what I mean? Is really lumber industry have that much control over the government that they wouldn't allow this thing to come out?
And like I said, that was just shooting up the hip. I mean, if it was alien or anything, like that too, you're right. I mean, they would try harder to cover it up than just turn the other way. And I'm sure you've talked to people that you've heard things that, the rest of us know nothing about. Some people don't like sharing their stories, which is, it took me a long time to want to tell anybody about this because it was kind of, I didn't feel like I was crazy. I know what I saw, but it was so short, I didn't want to waste anybody's time. It was just brief, it wasn't, didn't get to watch it for 30 minutes, didn't get to, didn't see it multiple times in the same general area over years or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I understand
I'm a firm believer in them because I'm pretty sure that's what we saw. 99.9%. I don't know anything else that gets up on two legs and runs off that can sit on its haunches and scrape in the dirt with hands. So,
no, it's hard to say what these things are. I hope you're right, to be honest with you. I hope I'm 100% wrong and delusional, and I hope that you're 100% right in the fact that it's just an unknown primate, non-human primate running around, or maybe even a human primate running around that we haven't been able to catch up with. That's what I'd like. I like that, but I have my doubts.
Yeah. And the more I think about talking to you, just a brief couple minutes, these things have been reported. The Indians are reporting them. So, you'd think after all that time, but I don't know if it is just a primate, it's extremely, extremely intelligent, probably more intelligent than we give it credit for, because it's got to stay stealth all the time.
Yeah, I couldn't
have one. So, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just strange when you start looking at it. Like I said, you would think the Russians would come out with it and say these things are real. Because, they have them in Russia. They have as many reports as we do here in America. Same thing with Australia. You think the Australian government would say, yeah, the Yowies are real. Yes, people have been seeing them forever. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing it. I enjoyed the chat. Like I said, I love the question. It's not meant to be a trick question by any means. It's meant to just get people's opinions and get people talking. That's the biggest problem in the Bigfoot world, which I'm not a part of. But that's their biggest problem is it's a bunch of idiots fighting with a bunch of other idiots, and no one actually talks. No one actually sits down, and everyone's so firm in what they believe this thing is. If you're so firm and you've already figured it out, then why bother being the topic? You know what I mean? It's good to have discussions about it, but it's not meant to put someone on the spot and go, So I hope you didn't take it that way.
Oh, no, I didn't. And I've listened to your show, your program enough to realize that wasn't it. I just don't never remember. But, I haven't been listening to your podcast that long. I backtracked a few episodes off and on. But I just can't never remember what your personal opinion you thought it was. But, you've given as good an answer as anybody's going to. You don't know.
It's true. It's true.
That's a fair answer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Bill.
Yep. Hey, thanks for letting me tell my story, Wes. And you have a good day.
Well, next up, I want to welcome Carl to the show. Carl, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, Carl, and I know that you're a retired deputy sheriff out there in Alabama, and you even had a recent encounter on your property where you were taking pictures and something showed up, and then I know you thought it might have been shadows, so you went back, and whatever was standing by you wasn't there. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I was clearing out a road. It was right in the bend of the road, and some trees had grown up, and it was kind of hard to make the turn without hitting the trees, and I had cleared the saplings and stuff out of the way. And I just picked my phone up and took a picture of it. And I didn't notice anything until I had got home, sat down, and started looking at the pictures. And I noticed something looked kind of strange there. And I said, no, it's got to be shadows. So the next day, same exact time, standing in the exact same spot, I retook the picture, and there was nothing there. And it was probably about maybe 100 yards away from where I was standing. It looks just like a Bigfoot. It looks like it's bent over, and I estimated it had to be at least 10 foot tall if it were to stood straight up.
Yeah, it's an interesting picture, and I haven't posted it because of how it's being transferred over, so I'm sure people are wondering why it's not on the site. But it's very small when Carl sends it to me, and we'll have to find a way to get the original picture and fix it, because it does look like there's something standing behind you. It's a very odd picture. When you had your 2 roadside crossings, did it happen while you were working as a deputy sheriff?
No, the both times I was off duty. Well, I was retired on the 2 roadside crossings.
Oh, okay.
I was visiting my parents over in Coffee County, which is just the county next over, and they got a farm over there, and they have a high line that runs across their farm. But it was in October. I will say it was around 8 o'clock, so it was already dark. I was driving. I had drove down about a mile and had to take a left turn to go where I need to go home. And I'm looking ahead, and I see something shadowy off in the distance. You know, my headlights hitting. And my first thought was it was a herd of deer running across the road right there. As I got closer, it looked like a person walking that had a big, big parka on. And I noticed that there was like little streaks on it, and it was glowing like just little lines, like reflective at best, I guess, but it was just little streaks, small streaks. There wasn't a whole lot, but I noticed that, and my mind's trying to put all this together. And then I got closer, and I noticed stuff hanging off the arms, and I'm thinking, what the heck is that? When it crossed the road, and I looked over, there's an old logging road, and there's a post that's right there at the beginning of the logging road, and that post is at least 8 foot tall. And as I passed by, I could see that there's outlines standing there. I'm still trying to process this. What have I just seen? And I hit the brakes, and I spun around and came back, and it was gone. It was no longer there. But whatever was standing there was a good, I don't know, foot or 2 taller than this post that was standing beside. And its head, it looked as big as the steering wheel of a car.
Was there any other details you remember? So the things coming off of it, was that hair? Is that what you're describing coming off it?
I'm guessing that was hair. The more I think about it, that looked like it was about the same consistency of hair hanging down off the arms. When it would move his arms, you'd see the hair hanging down. It's probably about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 inches long.
I'm interested when cops especially have roadside crossings, because there's been a lot. I've talked to a lot of them in the past, even some that have almost hit them with their patrol car. And when you saw this thing, was there any other details that you remember? What made you think it wasn't a person beyond being hairy and 8 feet tall? I guess that kind of answers its own question.
Like I say, I mean, all this happened within a matter of seconds, and I'm trying to process all this stuff. I'm like, what am I seeing? What am I seeing? I guess when about the time I was like, that was weird, and I hit the brakes and turned around and went back, and it was gone. I mean, that if it had been a person, I'm thinking that he'd still be walking down the road. He wouldn't have tried to hide or anything. He'd just continued to walk down the road, but it was gone. There was nothing there.
When you talk about it having a hoodie, I've heard that from other people that see it at a distance, think it's a guy with a hoodie on. So when you say hoodie, do you mean more of a cone-shaped type head? Because, when you wear that in the dark, it kind of gives the appearance of a cone-shaped head, even when a human's wearing it.
Like one of those polar parkas, like they wear up in Alaska and stuff. That's what it looked like. My first thought was that's somebody wearing a parka. the big hood on it and stuff. That's what it looked like. And as I got closer, it just, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
I mean, it just.
This wasn't the only time that you had a roadside crossing. There was a second incident. I think you were with someone, weren't you, Carl?
Yeah, I was with I had another house down in Geneva County, which is about 2 counties south of here. What was weird about this, that back in 2005, there was a farmer that lived down there within a mile of this sighting that we had. He had called an investigator out, and this guy, somebody, I don't know who it was, from California, and he doesn't go anywhere unless there's evidence. And this farmer had lost some cows, and then he saw this creature standing on the edge of his field one evening. Anyway, this guy came and I stayed a couple of weeks, I guess, and he determined there was a family pod living in the area. And on this particular day, I had left the house. You come up a hill, and there's a crossroads there. And I didn't get to see this one. And this is like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And my friend was chewing on some ice, and she happened to look over, and she about choked on it. I said, what? She says, I just seen something that looked like, I don't know, it was big. It was hairy. And she said it looked like it had a lion's mane on its head. I said, oh, gosh, man. I hit the brakes and turned around and rode down there, and it was gone by the time we got down there. And there's woods on both sides of the road, and there's a field up in the front part. And he crossed right there where the field joins the wood line. But that was about all there was to that day.
Strange description she gave with the lion's mane. I had Stephanie on Friday night show, and she talked about that, almost like it had kind of like a lion's mane, so much hair coming off the head and the neck, and very interesting. Now, you've been out on properties hunting, and you had a strange experience. I know you've heard vocalizations, and tell us about that when you were out there hunting.
I was sitting in a deer stand down in the river swamp on my granddaddy's place. It was in the afternoon, and it was about 75 yards from me, and it was a calm day. There wasn't any wind or anything. I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear a snap in this big, tall, it was an old pine tree that had died, but it was standing there, and it fell down. And I looked over, and I said, wow, that's kind of weird. I've never had that happen before. That same area, I come down out of the stand at night and be walking out of the woods. It's a good, I don't know, half a mile out of the woods. It would sound like something was pacing me every step I took, and I'd stop and it would stop. But I could hear it clearly. It walked when I walked, and it stopped when I stopped. And I've had that kind of stuff happen my whole life. Going back to being in law enforcement, I would sometimes, driving, I'd work nights. I'd work 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning. And I don't care who you are, you're going to get tired and sleepy when you're working that shift. When I start to try, run off a road, I'd find me a spot, Mostly I'd pull up in old graveyards because nobody goes in the graveyard at night because they're scared to death of graveyards. So I figured I could get up in the graveyard and sit there and catch a little snooze, and usually about 10 or 15 minutes, it was good enough to get me going again. But I'd hear noises. I'd hear wood knocks. I'd be sitting there, and I'd hear it sound like somebody with a baseball bat getting on the side of the tree. And it would be down in places that, even in the daytime, you wouldn't want to go down through it. It'd be so thick. Down in swampy areas and briars and stuff to get down to it. And I'd be thinking, who in the world would be down there at this time of night beating on the side of a tree? And I've had that happen maybe to me 3 or 4 times. I've heard the owl calls. I've heard some of these owls that didn't sound quite like an owl. And at the time, again, back during this time, I didn't really think anything about it. You'd have one owl go off, and then it'd be a bunch of owls,
Can I ask you, I know I had David on Friday night, and he talked about, he's not far from where you're at. He's only about 30 miles from where you're at. And he talked about going out to strange calls, out in the country. He would go out to these calls, and it was night after night after night. He'd go out to these different calls, and people would say, it's a prowler. he went out to one lady's house and she said, well, I think it was a black guy with a hoodie on that ran off the porch and jumped off the porch and then ran his hand all the way down the side of the home. And I know when David went out there, he said whatever this thing was, running its hand down the side of the house, it looked exactly how she described it, except for the hand was up about 6 feet. And he saw, tracks out there and everything else. Have you ever gone out to any coal like that you thought there's something else going on here?
Yeah, I've actually, now that you're talking about it, I got to think about this house I had to go to and take a report on. This guy was claiming that someone was coming up on his porch every night. And he'd hear it, and he would check it out. It'd be nothing there. But this happened night after night after night. And he never saw anything, but he'd hear noises on his porch, and he's got a ramp. You to get up on that porch, you have to walk up that ramp. There's no way off. You got to go back down the ramp or jump off the porch. But every time he would go to check it out, there'd be nothing there.
Yeah, it's interesting. So he thought it was like a prowler or something like that.
Yeah, that's what he thought. He said he had a neighbor that lived about a mile down the road. He was thinking it was this guy doing it.
Yeah, the more I listen to those, especially in that area, Carl, it just doesn't add up because, I know you're dealing with people in the country, and people in the country generally have guns, and so running up on someone's porch in the middle of the night, probably a bad idea.
Right, exactly. And his yard, his whole place is fenced in. He's got a gate. He keeps it locked at night. Thinking about it, it maybe could have been a Sasquatch. You would have to climb over the fence to get on this place, and it's a good 4 foot, 5 foot tall fence. So I don't know a lot of people that would want to climb over a fence and walk up on your porch.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Really makes no sense. What do you think Sasquatch is, Carl?
I've looked into it all, but the Bible, I think the Bible talks about it a lot. I believe they're the Nephilim, and if you look in the Bible, there's 36 tribes of giants, and they all have their own distinct how they look. There's different looks, like the Anakims. They are called the long necks. It means the long necks or chain necks. And when the Israelites out of the Exodus, when they left Egypt, they got to Israel. They sent spies in the land. And when they came back, they gave a report. They told them they looked like grasshoppers. To the giants. So they're sons of Anak. They called them Anak. It was a giant named Anak. That's my best conclusion on it. And if you listen to anything that L.A. Marzulli says, about the same time when the Israelites returned to the land, they drove the giants out or killed them. He said that was about the same time in the Americas that the mound builders, the mounds, and like the snake up there in Ohio, they call it the snake. I can't remember the name of it, but it's somewhere in Ohio where we got the serpent mound. That's what they call it, serpent mound. And he said that was about the same exact time that the mounds started showing up in the Americas. So his belief is that the giants were driven out and they came to the Americas.
Interesting take. You could be right. It's sure odd we can't catch up with them, and it's, but who's to say what they are? But like I said, you could be 100% right on it. Well, be safe out there on your property. I would love to get the original picture from you because, like I said, the small one that you sent me, it's just how it transfers. It's hard to make out anything, but it does look like there's something standing behind you. So be safe on there and keep me up to date what's going on that property, will you? And I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Well, next up on the show, I want to welcome Chris Marola to the show. He's the author of The One Who Runs and Hides. It's available on Amazon. And tonight we'll talk about some of his encounters. He bought this cabin in Connecticut, and it was empty for several years. And so he'll be talking about some of his experiences tonight. Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Wes. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, and I hope people go to Amazon, pick up the book. Again, it's called The One Who Runs and Hides, and it's all of Chris's experiences with these creatures. Now, I know back in 2009 or 2008, you moved into this cabin. What was your feeling about Sasquatch prior to moving into this cabin?
Not a clue really that much. You know, I remember the abominable snowman as a kid and all that, and you know, but really, Wes, not too much. I mean, I remember as a kid going to the drive-in and seeing the Bogey Creek was the one there, but you know, really, to be honest, didn't pay too much attention to it at that time. Really, in 2008, no.
And so you move into this cabin, and what happened? Was the encounter the first night you were there?
Oh, man. Okay. Let me see. Yes, it was. I'm divorced with 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And my 8-year-old I get twice a year during the summer. So when I had that week, it was just about the same time. It was my visitation with him. I had him with me, and we go down this huge, gorgeous road about 2.2 miles into the wilderness, and there was this cabin that I was able to stay at. And my son loved it and so on, and we go inside, and it's just perfect, really. You know, we cleaned it up because there was a lot of mice. No one's been living there for 11 years. It was just empty on this property. And this property, Wes, had over 800 acres. It belonged to a friend of mine's aunt and uncle. They had deceased, and their sons owned the property, and they were living in California, Georgia, Jersey, and they just didn't attend staying up there that much, maybe for 2 weekends during the summer and here and there. And they didn't stay at the cabin. They stayed at this mansion on the property. And this was a cabin, West, that was located not too far, about I'd say about 300 yards, 400 yards from the mansion on a pond. So I was able to use it, and I got in there that a few days before, cleaned it up before I had my son. After we watched some movies on TV, we decided to go to bed. So it's a one-bedroom cabin. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden I started hearing this cracking. And it started sounding like thunder, crack, crack, crack. And then it got louder and louder. And I'm going, wow, what's this? And then it started breaking, the sound. And then all of a sudden it would repeat itself. And myself being a hunter and an outdoorsman and fisherman, I tried to teach my boys the same thing. I'm going, what's going on here? So there were no lights on outside of the cabin. And I was rushing so fast with getting my little boy with me and everything. I didn't even bring a flashlight, and I felt like an idiot. Only thing of a flashlight we had his Johnny Depp Pirates of the Caribbean flashlight. And I'm going, oh, my God. I'm going, and this cracking like thunder was coming right outside. So I look over at my son. I'm going, man, he's not going to come here anymore, and he's going to tell his mother this, and I'm in trouble. So I'm looking at him, and he's knocked out. I can't believe he didn't wake up. So I get out of bed and crawl on my belly, and it was dark. And I go to the kitchen drawers, and I get the biggest knives that I got. And I go by the one of the back doors, and I'm peeking through the window, and I'm looking at where the sound was coming from, and it just kept on cracking. The sound was just terrifying, and I don't even know what's going on here. I'm going, this ain't a bear doing this, And I know we have moose, not too many, but we've had one moose in my time. But I'm going like, what's going on? Well, from 1:30 till about 4:30 in the morning. It didn't stop. And I have my back against the door with those knives against me. So whatever was coming through, okay, I'll do my best. My little boy's there just knocked out, and thank God he was. And dawn started coming around 5 or 5:30, and this was like in June. And I said, okay, well, I can go outside now, and something's going to jump on me. At least hopefully I have time to see it. So I walk out there, and I find these 7 to maybe 7.5 strips of bark off of this tree that was hit by lightning maybe a few years prior. And they were 3 inches at least thick and 4 inches wide. And I counted like 10 or 11 of them lined up in a pattern on the ground, not just thrown down. They were just lined up next to each other on the ground. And I'm going, what's this? And this was about 30 yards from the cabin. And I'm going, and I'm looking around on the ground because I hunted and everything. But because of the forest terrain in decades or years of all these leaves falling on, there weren't any impressions. So I'm looking for scat. I can't find scat. I'm going, oh, okay, I'm bewildered here. But something was so angry that took these huge strips of wood, which I kept and put under my cabin, which I still have. And, I said, okay, so I went inside, thinking, okay, I got my son and I brought him out, which probably wasn't the greatest thing to do, but I brought him out and I just wanted to teach her, okay, listen, let's see what, we can find any evidence around here, and we looked around, couldn't find a thing. So that afternoon, I said, you know what, let's go and have some fun. Let's go inner tubing down the river. So we go down, inner tubing down the river, Wes, and we had, it's a nice thing to do. And we come back after doing that, and as we're walking up the trail to the cabin, we smelled this smell that was really bad. And my son was laughing, going, hey, Dad, what did you, fart? What is that? Oh, my God. And I'm going, oh, my God, too. And I'm going, so we did get away from it. This was closer to the pond. So as we're walking up, right in front of the cabin steps, there's this huge dump that was like a Louisville Slugger. It was impressive. It was the Guinness World Book of Records of taking the dump. I'm going like, wow. It wasn't a pile. It was just straight like a baseball bat. And I'm going, well, knowing my hunting, this is leaving a mark of its territory. I'm saying to myself, my son's looking at that, but I have no idea. I didn't like what I've done now is grab things that I think are important samples and stuff, and I Ziploc and freeze it. At that time, we were just in awe, of just looking at it right on our steps. So we had to step over it to get into the cabin. So still, like you said, did you believe in Bigfoot or things like that? It didn't cross my mind, but I knew there was something out there that didn't seem to want us to be there. And just to remember, no one's been in this place for 11 years. And over 800 acres of property that people have been away from. And so I just pushed it away, and I go inside, and I call my girlfriend, and I said, come on up, and we'll barbecue, and we'll have dinner and so on. And she says, oh, okay, I'll go. But Wes was a city girl. We were opposite in so many ways. The only thing we liked is maybe going to the beach, and I like fishing from the beach. But she would just stay in her chair and drink wine coolers and stuff like that. But, because of my son and me asking her, she came up because she hated mosquitoes, everything. So she comes up for a few days. And the first night that she comes is like the next day or whatever. We're barbecuing, and I get the steaks out. We're sitting on the deck there, And it was just about 8:30 or so, and the sun was gone. And all of a sudden, this scream comes out behind us again, about 30 yards away in that direction, a little bit more to the right, about maybe 15, 20 yards. I'm thinking this of the volume. And I'm taking a quote from a guy that was on Ancient Aliens doing Bigfoot, and he heard the scream was identical that I could describe it. Imagine yourself pouring gasoline on somebody, lighting them on fire, and having the strength of an elephant bugling out, trumpeting out through you. And this scream lasted at least 25, 30 seconds. It didn't stop. You could feel it, and we're all sitting there, all three of us eating, and I get up and I walk to the corner of the deck looking where that sound was coming from, and I turn around, and my girlfriend and my son are just disappeared. So I go and I look in the cabin door, and there they are, grabbing the same big knives that I had. And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "What are you, crazy? We're going to protect ourselves." And I said, "Okay, all right, okay." And I started laughing a little bit because it was so comical seeing these two, and that's my sense of humor, grabbing these knives. She's a city girl. My son's 8 years old. And so I grab my son's Pirates of the Caribbean flashlight, and I go down the steps, and I go in that direction. That's where I'm crazy in some parts in my anatomy here. And they're screaming at me, "Get your butt out back here! Come back, Dad, please, Dad!" And I'm looking. Okay, now that this thing ripped off the bark off the tree, took a dump on the next to the deck there, and now I'm going, I got to figure out what this is. I'm going to see some eye shine or whatever I can, and it was getting almost completely dark, and I was out there for like 10 minutes, and I couldn't find anything. I just couldn't. And so I come back in, and they're giving me a tongue lashing and all this stuff. They don't even want to be, she didn't want to be there as much. He was okay, my son, but she just said, "What is that?" And I couldn't explain it to her. So that was the first situations that with my introduction of meeting Bigfoot Wes. That was the beginning.
Terrifying, especially when you don't know what's going on. When you have no clue what's going on. And so for the first year or so, that kind of went on, didn't it? This sort of thing where you guys would smell things, you guys would have screams. Did it ever come up and hit the cabin?
Well, recently, something did not too long ago, but back then, it never hit the cabin, no. What would happen sometimes, Wes, is when I was there sometimes by myself, I'd be lying in bed, and all of a sudden my bed started like shaking, and I could feel like almost like the birth, because this cabin is up on tilts. Okay, it's elevated about 4 feet above the ground the way it was built, and I'm going, whoa, in the bed, you could just feel the vibration. So by then I had flashlights, and then all of a sudden I would install floodlights. I put floodlights in the front and the rear and all this stuff because I'm prepared. I would slowly just keep the lights off inside, grab a flashlight, and I'd open that door. And as soon as I tiptoed down the steps, I'd look where that area was where the bed was vibrating and so on, and boom, nothing. And I'm going, what? And I was going you gotta be kidding me. So then I would go back in, and then all of a sudden, maybe 10 minutes later, boom, the bed, it would start vibrating again. You could feel the whole cabin. That's a one-bedroom cabin. But still, what I explain in the book was these things are magicians. They are, the David Copperfields of wildlife, nature, whatever, they can disappear and reappear when they want, and this was a head scratcher, but that's what they're able to do, at least in my case and my, seeing them.
I wanted to ask you, when did you first think it might be Sasquatch? I mean, when did that first kind of cross your mind?
When I first realized it was with Finding Bigfoot. And I was looking at this show and watching him, and I noticed people hearing screams and so on. And there was one particular scream that came from Michigan that I was watching the show, and my jaw just dropped. I was so happy to hear this because I thought I was going insane. And this scream was identical of what I heard this lady had recorded. And it was in Michigan. And this was like in 2010, I think, or 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2010. And I was picking up with Finding Bigfoot because it was just giving me information where I would be out in the woods and I find these structures. Like it was like inside of a skeleton of a tent. And this branch was bent this way, and this branch was bent that way, and this way, and I'm going like, wow, and I said, that's not made by nature. And then I'd find sometimes even smaller ones, like for a child or someone, not like 20 feet away. And I'm going to myself, okay, that's different. And then I'd find these branches, these young saplings that would be like snapped at 8 or 10 feet high, just snapped. All over, and those indications that I had on the property were the same things I was seeing on that Bigfoot show. And I was going, okay, this is too coincidental. This has got to be true. This has got to be it. When you watch the show with grandmothers talking about it and kids talking about it and their experiences and saying, oh, I saw this in the farm or in the trail, and I just said, these people can't be lying. I mean, they just can't be lying. I mean, why? Maybe some, but, and I was going, look, this is coincidental. It's the same thing I'm seeing. Then I started, Wes, to talk to my son about it. And the little one said, oh, yeah, and maybe I shouldn't have, but, letting him know that, this could be there up on the cabin on the mountain. And then I was talking to my friends and other family members. They all just said, you got to be kidding me. You can't believe that you in this myth or legend. I'm telling you, I was saying there's too many facts that are similar on the show. And then I started watching other documentaries on Bigfoot and Yeti, and they were just piecing together. Then my friends started distancing themselves with me, and so my family members. I mean, it really got to a point that either I was crazy or a liar. And when that came shoved in my face, I just couldn't, turn my back on this. And I went out to do everything impossible to research and get evidence and go out in the woods in the dark, in the daytime, collecting equipment and everything to this day, and after writing the book, I just let them know that it shut me off like that. And they did. Yeah,
it hurts when family does that, and friends. And, it's hard enough when a stranger calls you a liar or anything else, but it hurts even more when it's someone you love, The book, again, is called The One Who Runs and Hides. And so you go out there, Chris, and you start setting up trail cams, and you're finding evidence, and you're finding different things. And I know we talked about DNA. We can talk about that a little bit later in the show. But what happened when you tried to set up trail cams? What were you finding?
Okay. Well, at first, I was running to the grocery store and grabbing, cheap chuck meat and bones and pork chops and chicken thighs and legs, and and I was nailing them on throughout the forest in different locations, and and okay, all right, this is gonna work. And I put up my trail camera, and I'm carrying a step ladder with me on my back and going throughout the property, and so I set up. I come back like in a week to check it out. I could tell by some of the scat and stuff it was like, oh, it's not a really great sign, because I could see it was either from coyotes or possums or raccoons, or sometimes turkey vultures would come in, and I checked my film, and, that was the case. So I was beating my head against a rock, and so I started saying, okay, let's try something different. So what I did was I went and I was going through Walmart, and I see these wind chimes. And I'm going, wow, that's pretty cool, a beetle, and the other one was a butterfly, and this time now I know it's Bigfoot out there, and I'm going, okay, well, he's out in nature, I'm going to put wind chimes out there. So I grabbed like a half a dozen wind chimes, and I went to the pet store, and I was walking through there because I'm always checking out the pets, and I see these plastic pheasant, and I see these plastic ducks. I said, oh, okay. All right. So I grabbed a bunch of those, and where I hung the wind chimes, I would hang, on the same branch, maybe 5 feet down from it, a pheasant or a duck. And hard plastic, man, I'll tell you, these ducks, they're the squeaky toys. So after I was done, I put up the trail cameras in that location, and I wait a week or two, depending on what else I was doing, and I come back, and every one of my wind chimes and every one of the ducks were taken off the tree. Now, I know animals are not going to go up there that can't smell. It's not smelling a steak or a chicken or a pork chop. There was no scent to these. So I was just using the sound to attract them. And if they decided to grab the squeaky toy and share it with their little kid or whatever, carry it around with them, I just brought it because it just showed an animal of something that they would relate to. So I see it on the ground, and it's bit. I mean, this plastic duck, it bit off its wing, and it bit its tail. And the teeth marks are like human. They are straight down, like if you bit into a wax or something, and you saw your teeth down. There were no, like, really canine on it, And I'm going, wow. I said, okay, great, cool, and so I had my backpack. I took out my Ziploc bags. I put everything in, took photographs and stuff, documented everything. I go back home, put in the SD card, and I see, blue jays flying by it, squirrels running around because it didn't have any smell of meat or anything. So it was those things. And there was nothing. There was nothing of the creature. And I'm like fuming. I mean, I said, how could this happen? How could this happen? And it takes a picture of me walking up and checking the camera. But there is nothing except the evidence I found on the ground. And I stopped at all the places, and the same thing. The one thing I knew of was, okay, being frustrated and bewildered, how can it take my picture, but not that, it was just upsetting, but at least I have the evidence. Then after watching more of Bigfoot shows and so on, I just try to listen and, with people like, Native Americans, they were talking about it, and individuals in, the mystique about them. And I was listening to one, and she says, if you try using sweets, they like sweets, candies. So, I said, all right, let's try that. When I started using Babe Ruths and Milky Ways, and I was using mini size. I wasn't buying the big bars because I was just putting them up. I had now buy like 10 cameras by then, so I was just sticking them on there all over. They loved it, and the other thing that they love. So if your listeners want to do this, is peanut butter and bird seed. I just by accident, whatever. Just freeze your bread, get it nice and hard, get the peanut butter on it, slap it all around and stick it in birdseed and then keep it frozen till you want to hang it out there. They do enjoy that.
But you never got them, though, Chris, on camera eating any of those things, correct?
Never get. That was the thing. I knew they were there, but never that I got on camera filming that. I did get them on camera by accident. A bear came down and climbed the tree and grabbed 2 of my cameras and crushed them. And I said, oh, man, look at this. So I had a picture of the bear. You see the bear grabbing the camera and taking it down. So I was able to work one that it worked properly. But it was so cracked that I couldn't keep it out in the elements. What I did was I put it in my porch, in the screen part of my porch, and, pressed it along there so it was facing out. And one day, Wes, I went and checked my camera, and this is one of the videos that I have on YouTube. You just see this creature in the background, like almost like Predator, and with Arnold Schwarzenegger. This was like 7:30 in the morning, so it was daylight, and you see this movement, of this almost like invisible, but it's there. You can see it moving and going through the bushes and bringing the branches back and forth in the background. You almost can see like a hand, and then all of a sudden you see this creature, the Bigfoot, walking by the camera. But it's just like that Predator when he was like invisible in the trees and it had that type of effect. And I'm looking and seeing the trees are normal, the bushes are normal, and you can see them, but you see this outline, and it was going by the cabin. So that was one way I was able to get it on the trail camera. Just recently, I was out in the woods in October. I was collecting mushrooms. I've learned how to pick them, and these aren't psilocybin and all that kind of stuff. They're just red mushrooms. I could pick chicken of the woods to oyster, and I was out there picking, and all of a sudden I see this branch come down from the top of the trees, and then all of a sudden I see this figure like the Flash. I mean, like that thing that you see on X-Men or whatever, that kid that runs up, running through the forest there. Now, this is October. Leaves are a lot gone, so you could see far, and it was running. I started walking towards that branch again, and all of a sudden, another crack, boom, bang breaks down, and it was a sign saying to me, okay, you got far enough right now, don't come any farther. So we've had a respectability here, because they're always watching me. Later that night, I always put food out on my deck of apples and whatever, ring dings, whatever. I put them on the railing of my deck. If they want to come and get it, they come and get it. That's what I'm doing, because they don't like me now. I figured out. They let me know, don't put the food on the nails on the tree, because they started taking the food off the nail, and then they started pushing the nail into the wood, into the tree, just pushing it in. So I said, okay, you don't want me to hang it on the tree for you? I won't. I set up the camera inside the screen again on top of my tripod with the telescope on, just head on the side. He came up on the deck, one of them did, and doesn't show him coming up on the deck, but it shows him coming back, walking down the deck steps. I was sleeping, and this was after about maybe 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. I think that's when I finally went to sleep. But he walked right down the steps. You never hear him. They don't want to be heard. So that's another way that I got it on video on that. And then the third one, which I'll put out soon, is back in the beginning, around 2012. I was with my son, and when we came back from shopping, I said, okay, if you want to go and run in and play your Xbox, go ahead, I'll carry the groceries in. And I was carrying the groceries in, and I hear this. no one's up there, and I know my birds and stuff. And then I hear, not too far in the distance, bat. And I heard these whistles, and they were very close, but I couldn't see anything. But I knew by then, in 2000, I think it was 12, that it was them, because some of the shows that I was following were, said, hey, they do whistle. They do whistle. I said, okay. So after they did it like twice, I whistled, and nothing happened. It was quiet. That evening, I had this camera, and it was one of those disc cameras. And I said, okay. I said, son, I'm going to go outside for a little step in the water. It was in May. It was warm, and he was fixated on Xbox playing. I mean, as long as I had that, he was happy, and he's with me. He sat there and watched. It's okay, Dad. So I'm walking out, and I had the floodlights on. I started going, well, here we go. And then I started whistling, and I kept going, and then I get to the brook, and over there in the brook, I stopped, and I filmed around. There was some light of moonlight there, but there was also the light of the cabins coming out. So I go back in. 2 months later, I asked my son, why don't you bring a couple of your friends up to the cabin? So they came over. I was showing some of the video that I was taking, and his friend was looking at me. He says, hey, Mr. Marola, is that eye shine? And I says, wow, that is eye shine. So I took to this, and I zoomed it, and there he is, his head, blinking and turning his head. If I had walked another 30 feet, we would have exchanged phone numbers. I just couldn't believe it, and I didn't see it. If it wasn't for my son's friend, I would never have seen it. And you blow it up, 20 times the size, and you just see his head turning in the temple, the point on his on his head there, and he was watching me, and I had no clue. Even after the whistling that day, they were there, and they're always watching me. That's the thing, no matter what, they're always watching me. If they want to appear, they'll appear. And believe it or not, they have a sense of humor. I'm sure I've heard some of your callers in and saying that they're threw logs at them and boulders and everything. Well, in the beginning, yes. But after a while, Wes, they would, I'd be sitting there at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I hear crack, boom, bang again. I'm going, oh, trees coming down. And so I get in my car the next morning, and I'm driving out the driveway, and there's a beautiful, healthy birch tree that's, 12 inches diameter, broken 6 feet above the ground, and they blocked me from leaving. So they would do things like that so I wouldn't get out. And then I knew when they did things like that, they were saying, okay, you're right. You're okay. I felt though
I probably would have taken that a different way. I've actually been in a situation like that, very similar to what you're describing, where I've gone down a trail and then I turn around, come back, and my path is blocked. And I was just there a few seconds ago, and it unnerved me. I don't know that I was so happy about it or thought it was funny. It really unnerved me. You weren't worried at all seeing that tree blocking the path intentionally for you not being able to leave?
Not at that time. I mean, there were other times in the beginning maybe, but I knew they didn't. I looked at it, Wes, is that they didn't want me to leave. There was, instances, where with the screaming, yelling. Like there was one time when my girlfriend, she came up and we went up to the mansion on the property, and it's an open field. It's like 30 acres of open field, and we're sitting there at the stars and stuff, and all of a sudden, this truck comes up, and they do this quite, and they were deer poachers. So they shine the lights in the field, and they just shoot the deer. So I see them there, and I packed everything like liquor and beer and stuff, but I didn't pack like my air horn, and I forgot to bring a flashlight again, and we're up there, and it was pitch black. I'm talking black as black. I wasn't too sure if these poachers were drinking, but I knew they had weapons, and I didn't have any weapons. So I say to her, listen, just follow me. I knew the property really well by then, and let's go and get to the cabin where I can get the bear horn or protection. So she kept on saying to me every 20 feet, I need to smoke a cigarette. I'm saying, listen, stop squeezing my hand so bad, and we'll get back to the cabin, and let's get back to the cabin. And this was a long journey, because I had to take the back way, and I didn't want them seeing us, and especially if they're drinking and they're on private property and they're not supposed to be there. Who knows what was going to happen? It seemed like an hour, but it was probably only 10 minutes. And as soon as I get close to the cabin, that scream entered again. And it was a little bit closer to the poachers with that gasoline lit on fire, the strength of an out blowing, and you could just feel it. And this is the second time with my girlfriend. She's experienced this situation with me, and she's crushing my hand. And she can't believe it. And I said, see, this is Bigfoot. And I went upstairs. We went upstairs inside, and all we could see is that truck with the door slamming, whatever, taking off down the road. That's how that strength. They just left. So I went and grabbed the regular flashlight, and I went into the woods right away in that direction to look for him. Couldn't find him, but I think he sensed, at least in my opinion and how I felt, that he was pissed at the poachers. And like I say, they watch everything. And he came out there and let them know that he wasn't happy about it. So they can take a liking to you, and if they know that you're a good person, everybody can be a good person, but they don't know that. But after the years, they consume that, especially with the hunting part and so on. I won't kill anything unless I eat it, and they just followed my behavior. Watch as I'm out late at night checking the deer or the skyline or whatever. They watched me quite a bit, and they had amples of time to break my neck, my legs, and hide me, and they never did. In the beginning, maybe they would have, yeah, but maybe if it was that, but they didn't. So
I'm curious.
I was never.
What makes you think that they took a liking to you? Because I hear other people say that. I mean, are you assuming that just because you haven't been harmed? Or is it more or less just a gut feeling?
When I would come, let's say from the coming from Waterbury, going back to the cabin in the spring, they would leave trees. They would put maybe 4-inch wide saplings and leave them in the road, so I'd have to get out of my car and remove them. There wasn't big trees, but they would leave 2. And I was looking at this. They did that several times, every time I would come back. And I didn't know what math question this was, Wes. I mean, was it telling me that there was 2 of them there, or 3 of them there, or 1 of them there? They let me know. Or, sometimes, when I'm watching the Bigfoot shows, they would say, well, people would put rocks on logs or rocks on big rocks and make put 5 or 6 rocks, and then I would come back and the pattern that I left the rocks were different. They would either add a rock or change the line of the rocks and make them. I would see things that they were trying to make a suggestion that they were there, and they like I said, they watched me, and they even nature I'm talking deer, I'm talking coyotes. They knew me, and and I'd smoke cigars, and they knew my cigar smell. If I was out there with my 6-pack of beer, and I'm looking at the stars, and I bring my telescope, Wes, they would see that, and the animals would, especially like there was one incident where the coyotes were chasing this deer, and these 2 deers came right up to me, and they knew the coyotes were chasing them, but they felt that for some reason that, hang around near me, that maybe they'll make it. And sure as hell, man, they did that, and then the 3 coyotes that were chasing them, they come up and they see me, and boom, they stop. And then the coyote starts, howling that particular time. One year where the coyotes were nice enough to show me their litter. They had 3 pups, and they were like snowballs. And they don't do that. They just don't normally do that. But when the sun was setting, they knew I was sitting there looking out in the field like I did every night. And they let me see them. So I'm just saying that this family of Bigfoots, and I don't have one. There's several. They notice that, and especially when I'm the only person up there. Really, basically, I'm it.
I know there's a lot of different incidences that took place, and again, the name of the book is The One Who Runs and Hides on Amazon. And Chris, I've heard, this isn't the first time I've heard stuff like this. I know for the audience it might seem kind of weird, like seeing something transparent. But I've heard this many times in many different situations with people, and I don't know what to make of it, to be honest with you. I really don't know what to make of it. I believe the people. I just don't know what to make of it. But you actually came face to face with one of these things, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I've had 6 encounters with them. I don't know which one you want me to begin with. I guess let me start with, it was the springtime, back in 2014. And, there's nothing blooming really then. It was in April. I was walking through the back of the cabin, maybe 400 yards behind. It was an old wooden timber road trail where they would cut down the trees and use it. And as I was walking by, I looked and I noticed this deer that was killed. And when I walked over to it, all the limbs were taken off, the bones were broken, but the thing that surprised me was all the hair had been removed from the carcass, the deer, and put separately. It was like a Persian rug, and that's in the book, and I took pictures of it and everything. It was just like, 10 feet by 12 feet. All the hair was taken off the deer, and it just hit my mind that, wow, okay, he doesn't like hair in his food when he eats it. After, taking pictures and everything of that, I started walking up towards the cliffs, and over time, I knew where they like to hang out. They go all over. But I just decided, okay, well, this wasn't too far. So I started walking, and it's about 10:30 in the morning, daylight, and I'm getting towards the top of the cliffs, maybe 30 yards away, and the cliffs ridge line went for maybe a quarter of a mile, this particular one. And as I turn, already in motion is this huge black Bigfoot, and I'm saying about 9 feet, running towards me up on the cliffs. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm ready to go with my camera. I go on this, and I have it on my, my pocket. And I am just sitting there, and I'm seeing this thing run. And listen, this guy, he would win the gold medal in any Olympics. I'm telling you, this thing, they are fast. But the thing was, it's so unorthodox how they run. They run like the German goose step. I mean, the way the body is and their legs going, it doesn't look like it's right. But how could something like that run so fast? And there he was running skinny. Now, everybody, thinks that Bigfoots are huge and wide and, 800 pounds. Well, this thing was like on a slim diet, and he was just running. And I would say I had it was 70 yards, just watching him. And he went by me so fast that the crazy part was there was this tree, and I'm waiting, and he was going so fast, he didn't go past the tree. And I was thinking to myself, just watching, how could he not go past the tree going that fast, E equals MC squared by Einstein. You have to figure that something that fast has to take at least, another 20 yards just to slow down. And it just stopped. So I'm going, okay, all right, I'm going to meet you. It's time to meet. If he was running that fast and wanted to come at me and grab me, he could have detoured and come right at me. So as I walk to that tree, I'm walking to the center of that tree so I can see him come left or I can see him come right. And I get right in front of the tree, nothing's happening. And so I walk around the tree to the side, nothing's there. I look over a little farther, about 20 feet away is the cliff's hangover. And I'm going, even still, man, how could he go that fast and then make a quick left and jump from there? So I don't know what to think. So I go back to the beginning of his marathon, and I'm looking, and there are stumps and there are broken trees and bushes and rocks sticking out. I don't know how he didn't trip and fall, knock his teeth out. He just ran like he was running on pavement, and he ran that way. And it was still a head scratcher. The only thing that I didn't do was look up the tree. I didn't look up the tree, so that was my fault on that. But I was just amazed on how fast that thing ran on rough terrain. And that was one incident.
Let me ask you, was there ever a time when you got a good look at the creature? Got a good look at its face?
Oh, yeah. I got a good look. Even looking at that face, you're talking about 70 yards. You're looking. I mean, he was black as black, shiny, running. His face is sort of flattened. It didn't have the peak like other ones that I've seen have, but no, it didn't. But anyways, the one that he came over to the cabin. This was 2 years ago. Wait, now 3 years ago, 2009. Yes, so it was about 3 years ago, and it was about 10:30 at night. I go out on the porch and I shine my flashlight, and there, I kid you not, this Bigfoot was at least 12 feet. And I'm looking at my freezer, my refrigerator, and he had to be every bit as wide as I'm staring at right now. And he was a reddish brown. I was shining the flashlights on his face. He didn't like it. But the kicker about this, Wes, is that I was ready to go and bring him some apples and stuff because he was just sitting there watching me. The eyes was a step backward. I wasn't ready to see the eyes glowing. And I'm telling you, it was like headlights. And for your listeners and hearing this and saying, wow, this is going to... No, these eyes were red, orange, yellow, and they were beaming. And then, and I'm sitting there on my deck, and it's no more than, I'm saying 25, 30 yards from me, and he, when I shine the flashlight on his face and eye, he would go behind the tree, and then he'd come back, and he would just, and then I learned, okay, I'm not going to shine in your face. I'll shine it around your knees and that. But the eyes, they were just something I was not aware of that they had. So after staring at him and he's staring at me for 5 minutes or whatever, I said, okay. I walk into the cabin, grab some apples, and I just went out front, had 2 apples. I put 1 apple on the railing. I said, you know, I was going to come to you, but if you want to come to me, I'm right here. So I took my apple, and I ate that thing for like 30 minutes. I mean, I just chewed it slowly. I made all these like delicious sounds trying to say, okay, come on, you want to come over? Come over. But I didn't have the balls or the courage to go to him at that point because of his eyes. So I sat and ate the apple, you know, and after eating the core and everything else, it's okay. So I go over and sit in my chair, and I said, all right, I'll have my back on, and maybe he wants to walk up behind me and take the apple, and then maybe he'll come back another time. And so I sat there, and maybe another half hour went by. I looked over, and the apple was still there, and he was still there. And he was just, you know, swaying a little bit back and forth, just staying right there with the eyes. And so I said, okay. And then I went and sat in the chair, and maybe another 10, 15 minutes went by. And I went over again, and he had left. Didn't hear a twig break. Didn't hear, you know, anything. There was no wind or nothing. It was in the summer. And it was this quiet night. And then, so I left the apple out for him. And I said, okay, well, maybe I'll take it and come back. And the next morning I went out there, and the apple was still there. It proceeded and did it again the next night. And he came there. And I still didn't have, and I kicked myself in the teeth to this day because I'm praying for him to come back. With the eyes, I don't care. I don't care anymore. Honest. I kid you not. You know, and this time, of course, I'll be scared. You know, there was something that he wanted to make contact with me, and I believe that in my heart and soul, and I didn't reach out because of the eyes.
Yeah, it's strange about the eyes. What did the face look like?
The face was, you know, what I could see without getting him annoyed that I was going back. He had the peak, you know, and it was like an orange reddish hair. And the face, what I could tell was not hairy. You know, I mean, there was patch where you can see the skin. You know, it was flat. The forehead didn't have as much hair as you know, like a widow's peak. It was shaved back. I mean, there wasn't hair that far up front, but you could see. You know, you're just looking at this creature with these eyes popping out. And just swaying, you know, just 2 inches this way, 2 inches that the whole time, unless I shined the light in his eye, and then he went behind the tree and waited for me to take it away. And it was just a huge, the girth, the size. I'm looking at a freezer, man, and every inch, if he wasn't a little bit wider than that, and he was a 12-footer. I went out there and looked. I'm going, yeah, he was bigger than the other one that I saw that was really skinny.
The ones you've seen, would you say they look more human-like? Would you say they look more ape-like, you know, more like a non-human primate? How would you describe the face?
Well, I mean, the ones that I have seen have all looked primate, okay? You know, they didn't have the human features that you would, like I saw some of your listeners talk about or on there. They didn't have that. It was more ape-like.
What happened with your neighbors? You said your
okay. So this is on the estate. They have a guest house, and they finally said, "Well, you know what? Let's have some some people rent the guest house, and you know, we'll make some money that way for taxes, whatever." Because you know, they were selling the property. They wanted to sell the whole piece of acreage for over $25 million. But they had this guest house besides the mansion where, you know, if people, they didn't like to come and stay in the mansion. This thing was built in the 1930s, this property, everything that they got. They had some people move in, and they looked at the property as an amusement park. And they had quads and and they had, all kinds of motor recreational vehicles, but they were going through the woods with them. They tore up the woods and the property in the back, and that was like a week after I saw the 12-foot glow-in-the-dark eyes Bigfoot. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. And I'm this place is just magical. And they came and just invited their friends and neighbors, and everybody was coming up there west with every quad and recreational vehicle, and they were going throughout the property. And they were paying a good amount of money to stay in this guest house. I noticed that the deer weren't coming back, and I noticed that wildlife had changed. And I spoke to my friend's, the cousin. I said, listen, man, they are destroying the habitat, everything here. It's not my place to say, you can't do this or can't do that. And, he's a quiet, introverted person, and he just, didn't make an effort. So in the book, which we didn't get to, when I first was putting up trail cameras throughout the property, there was an officer that worked for a DEP that would hunt on the property. We finally became friends. So I gave him a call, and I said, listen, man, I says, you got to come and do something here because, these past, 6 months, the habitat, everything, driving could hear the quads and 2 miles that way, half a mile this way, and things are changing. And he says, you got to be kidding me. So he came over, he sat with me on the deck, we were watching what was going on. He said, oh, that's what I got to see. He and his father and so on had been hunting on the property well before I got there. And so he came over, went and talked to the people and said, listen, if I catch you doing this or doing that, it's going to be hard for you to do anything around you because it's a small town, whatever, and this and that. You can't be doing this. They listened to his words. Then they didn't do it for a while, and then they went back and started doing it again. And it was just changing the whole place. So I called him up again and said, listen, I put trail cameras in the woods, and what they would do is that when I wasn't around, they would go out and ride the bikes and everything throughout the woods, and then when they knew I was home, they wouldn't do it. So I got the trail cameras. I was looking at them, look, he's going down here, they're going down, the kids are doing this and that. And so he came over again, I showed it to him, and then he went over there and showed him the footage that I had. So that ended that. But they had done so much damage that I didn't see them anymore. Bigfoot had left. And believe me, man, I was fuming. Because, just the week before they invaded the property, this creature came to me. And I couldn't find him. And I went out every time, every other day, whatever, throughout the property. Couldn't find any signs of broken limbs or stuff. They were just gone. Every so often then, I'd start seeing, 3 deer here, maybe 7 deer over there eventually coming. Because it took a while. I would say it took maybe 7 months. 7 months or so where you would start seeing deer. When I first got there, it was like Africa. It was like Kenya. You'd walk up there. I counted driving up the dirt road in this field, I counted one night 67 deer. They were like sitting on the grass and chewing their it just was beautiful. And that was an environment that Bigfoot could survive on, because nobody was there. It was private property. But, after like 7 months, I started seeing, more and more things coming around. You could see a bobcat. I've seen 2 mountain lions being up there. And then one night, I'm sitting up at the big house, and I had my friend I dedicated the book to, Tambourine Willie. He just passed away, but he would come up there, and he loved Bigfoot and UFOs and all that. And we're sitting up there and looking at the sun coming down. It was still, you had some daylight, and the coyotes were going off. Now they were like, you could hear all the octaves west, from the adults to the pups. They were just all celebrating. Maybe there was 9, 10, 12, I don't know. And then off in the distance, and I have this recorded, I'll send this to you. Off in the distance, I hear this lone coyote. And it's going, oh, and I'm listening to it, and all of a sudden the other coyotes, they just stop. Nothing happened. Maybe 2 minutes later, oh, it was just kept on going. And I'm going, that's supposed to be a coyote, I said, Willie, but, that's not a coyote. And I know, the animals have. So we're sitting up there, and it got dark. And we're looking at the guest house. Now, things had tapered down. We're looking at the guest house, and I'm up on there. I'm looking, and all of a sudden, we see some flashlights come out and start walking around the house. And I'm going, look at this. What's going on? And this is right where the howling was not too far from that. So they go back in, maybe 10 minutes later, Wes. We see the bunch of flashlights come, and everybody's circling around the house. They go back in, maybe 30 minutes later. Everybody's outside the house walking around the house, and we're sitting there watching them going, wow, he must be peeking or doing something, getting their attention, because they're just, you could just see them. Everybody's looking around in the woods trying to see something. So that night, me and my friend get back to the cabin, and we go to bed. And then I wake up in the morning. Now, I have this 15-pound cast iron solid duck that I have on my porch, and it doesn't move. It holds the door open. It's gone through all these winters, and it never falls over. Never. I wake up, I go outside to open up, and I can't open my door. I see that the duck is lying on its side, and it's pushed right up to the door, which was holding the door open earlier that night. He pushed it, so when I opened the door, I couldn't, I said, Willie, come look at this. And what he did was he climbed up on the porch. He pushed the duck on its side to let me know. And, and I was like dropping the duck on its side to see how loud it was, and it was really, really loud. I knew then that some came back. Just like recently, they'll come on the porch. I can't tell you why. I can't hear them climbing up the steps or walking on there, but they do. And that was letting me know through all that turmoil and disparity of how this magical place was deteriorating, but started to climb back. And it's never been like it was with the wildlife, especially when you have that much deer and population. I kid you not, because they knew no one else was there except me. I had the whole place. They leave their nose. They'll come in and they'll push their nose against my window, and you can look at it and go, it's saying he was staring in my cabin. He'll come up there and press their nose, and it's I have these glass windows in the cabin, and they're about maybe 6.5 feet high, these glass windows that open up. They'll go up to almost to the 6'3" range, and I'm only 5'10", and they're there, and you can see their nose. So they come up there and they let me know that they're around. They'll do things like that, besides breaking trees or whatever,
I want to ask you, Chris, one final question.
Sure.
What do you think that these things are? I mean, you've been in this situation where you've interacted with them. What would you say they are?
Okay, my opinion. Well, first, they are the guardians of our forest. Okay, that's all I can tell you, and that they are here. I think it's the right thing. They watch over the land. I believe, like the Native American Indians, and that's the reason I named the book The One Who Runs and Hides because Satuko means the one who runs and hides in Indian language. And it's appropriate. This is my opinion, and I could be wrong. I think they've been here for thousands and thousands of years, but they're not from here. When I see those eyes glowing like they do and how they disappear in front of me, something magical that they have. I know, speaking with several experts that are in the field of, anthropology and all this, and I mentioned that, what I've seen with the eyes and so on, they sort of like say, oh, well, I don't know about that, I think it's a missing link, or I see it, it came from that, whatever that one tooth they found in China that now is supposed to be Anthropithecus, whatever, they just can't think outside the box. And that's the problem with a lot of individuals that don't believe. If you're going to think, have an open mind, not everything is black and white. It really isn't like, it just isn't presented. I didn't ask for this when I went to the cabin. It was presented to me. I could have just turned my back and walked away and not go through the heartaches and problems with family members and friends, but I went and researched and what I found out is that they are here, they're living, they're not a myth or legend, they're among us, and they will be among us. But to your point, I just think they've been here for thousands of years, and from Russia, the Yeti, to Canada, and into places where they say the small one that lives in Indonesia. There's a reason for this. I can't say why, but that's why I say they're the guardians of the forest. They've been here for so long. And when you watch the History Channel, they talk about that with some things with ancient aliens and so on, and Enochs, and they were saying how they were brought here to do labor and do the physical work that regular man couldn't do. And they were saying that in the History Channel, and that they were saying that they live here, like I'm saying, but they're not from here. And that's my opinion. And, but they are here. So if you believe they're not from here, but they are here, that's great. Just believe that they are here.
Chris, I appreciate you coming on and sharing what happened to you. And for the audience out there, if you want to go through all of the experiences, we just touched on just a few. Wouldn't you agree, Chris? I mean, there's so much that happened over this time frame. We just touched on a few things,
Yeah, we went back and forth and here and there. I skipped so much. I'm just going off the top of my head of certain things just to talk to your listeners about. But it's riveting. It's scary. There are some scary parts in it, especially in the beginning and so on. And they can be, believe it or not, I mean, funny in some of the things that I went through. But I'm glad it happened to me, Wes. I'm so happy, and I'm glad that I'm able to share this with other people. Hopefully, with the DNA that I have, and that it can be proven. And this is what I'm trying to do, is to prove that this is not to be dismissed, and they are here.
Well, they're definitely here. They're definitely here. Thanks again, Chris.
Oh, Wes, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor. Thank you very much.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.
Mindlessly drinking, not tasting. me, bring the shore to life. Save me from myself.